One of the reasons I wanted this position is that I get to sit in both worlds that are parallel. You know, all students are general education students first, right? We say that, but it's true. It's backed up in revenue. All students generate revenue for the district by membership. And so a student with disabilities who's receiving special education services is no different. That allows, and you know, that's the reason for inclusion, that they have a right to a seat in the general education classroom. That's a good piece to make sure that we all belong.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Brighter Together podcast. My name is Janet Courtney, and my special guest today is Kelly LaBelle Lewis. Kelly is the Assistant Director of Special Education Services at Red Lake ISD 38. She has her master's in education. So, Kelly, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Janet. Thank you for the opportunity to come and share a little bit about my journey in education and providing services to all different types of learners and collaborating with our educators in my district and also in the Twin Cities where I'm originally from.
Awesome. So tell everybody a little bit about what's going on there.
Yeah. So I am new to the position at Red Lake. This is my first year. Really excited to be here. We are a unique public independent school district at Red Lake because we are located on Red Lake Reservation, also Red Lake Nation. And so what makes us unique is that part of our funding is through impact aid because we do not get local tax revenues from housing. How Red Lake Nation is different than other tribes and reservations in the state of Minnesota is there is not an allotment. So all land is held in trust for our tribal members. So they don't technically own a property to put a house on, which is why we don't have those property tax revenues like typical
that makes sense. Yeah.
traditional school districts. And so impact aid is really important as a revenue for us. And also almost 99% of our student learners are Native American. We do serve 5 surrounding communities that also, because we're an open enrollment state, can bus in, but that is the majority. And what drew me to Red Lake for this important work is I'm also a tribal member, not of the Red Lake Nation, but of Lake Traverse in South Dakota, Sisseton, Wahpeton, Iote. But I grew up in the Twin Cities. I worked in lots of different schools in the Twin Cities, and I've walked both cultures, mostly the dominant white majority. And so connecting with Indigenous people is important to me in my work. Native American students are one of the highest populations that are identified in special education services. And so students of color, that overrepresentation is important work for me.
Yeah. And why is that? I mean, do you have, I haven't studied it. Honestly, I'll be honest, but I know that you're not the first person to say that, and I know that it's a fact, but what is the reason for that?
Sure. It's a multitude of reasons. And I think it really, instead of blanketing brown students or students of color, that overrepresentation of identification in special education services applies to all. You know, every group has their journey and part of that historical trauma. And, you know, when we talk about historical trauma, it's sometimes the larger audience in the world says, oh, but that was in the past, get over it. But there is a piece of historical trauma that is carried through generations. And how I think about it is all of us come from families that aren't perfect, right? Our parents did the best they can do, our caregivers, our guardians. And so intergenerational values, morals, and parenting styles grow and evolve, hopefully, right? With research, we do better as we evolve
Hopefully,
as a humankind. Yeah, hopefully. But we all have that dysfunction or that not so perfect functioning family system. And so in my mind, how I think about it is historical trauma based on the group that may have experienced that. Let's take Indigenous people. That is carried throughout the DNA. It's carried on to generations. So even though our young people today who are thriving, they have scholarship opportunities, they are seen, the University of Minnesota has lots of initiatives, right? We're becoming better as a society. In education, there are families, parents and grandparents that were in boarding schools. There are parents that don't trust the government, educational system, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you
Mm-hmm.
think of the big three, the juvenile justice system, because they have been ostracized, they've been marginalized, they've been traumatized, they've been murdered. So, not to
Yeah.
be heavy, but those stories carry from
Yeah.
your grandparents.
Yeah.
And so that affects parenting. And,
Mm-hmm.
and so that overrepresentation, I believe, is because of the trauma that our students are exposed to, the lack of opportunity, especially on
Mm-hmm.
reservations because they're more remote.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that infrastructure for finances, economics aren't there, you will see challenges in learning. We also, if we don't have high expectations of our students of color,
Mm-hmm.
then those high expectations aren't there. They're not going to achieve in a high expectational manner, right? They're going to do
Right.
the bare minimum. And so
Right.
there's a couple factors that are around that, but usually the referrals that we get in special education has to do with inability to focus or learn or behavior. Oh, they might
Mm-hmm.
need a sped, eval because they're not
Mm-hmm.
behaving in my class. But every
Right.
behavior has a function. And so for Red Lake, what is beautiful and I think really unique is, there's a big push in equity, right? That's our
Mm-hmm.
buzzword. Everything needs to be equitable, and of course, that's a beautiful paradigm shift in what we want to do for everyone, even in education and beyond. But more than that, at Red Lake, we talk about culture and cultural pedagogy, and that students should see themselves in the classroom. What we're doing at Red Lake, and I think is unique, is that instead of teaching culture, we're using culture to teach. And so we have Ojibwe language and learning that is embedded in our K through 12 programming. When you talk about something like zones of regulation, in self-regulation, one of the hallmarks that we teach kiddos, we have it in our classrooms posted also in Anishinaabe or Ojibwe language.
Oh, right. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we also have state standards. We're the first district with our work in our Ojibwe language education department. They have created state standards in K through 12, a scope and sequence. How do we come alongside and teach our Ojibwe language in our English, in our math, in our social studies, in our science? So it's really cool.
That's exciting. That is really exciting. And
Yeah.
it's really interesting to think about how, the history and how who we are. I think we touched on it a little bit before we started recording about, our intrinsic bias and who we are as human beings and how we think. And all of us in education want to help kids. I mean, even Child Find, if you go back to
Oh, yeah.
Bush and Child Find, and the whole point of that was to help students that were struggling to learn, but we didn't know what we know now. So I see the over identification, but it's also let's instead of just saying, oh, you're special education, let's figure out how we can make it so that you can access education. I think it was a good concept. I just they don't fund it well, and then we over identify, and then everybody's left with a child who really needs something that we're not necessarily giving them that we can now, right?
Absolutely. And I think so there's 2 points that made me think about what you said. And one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that we're also doing at Red Lake is the Dreamcatcher project through MDE,
All right.
and what that does is that looks at through that indigenous lens uh, processes and protocols to make sure that we're not over identifying students of indigenous heritage. So that is a piece of what we're doing that's embedded in our referral process. One of the reasons I wanted this position is that I get to sit in both worlds that are parallel. All
Mm-hmm.
students are general education students first, right?
Mm-hmm.
We say
Yeah.
that, but it's true. It's backed up in revenue. All students generate revenue for the district
Right.
by
Right.
membership. And so
Mm-hmm.
a student with disabilities who's receiving special education services is no different. That allows, and that's the reason for inclusion, that they have a right to a seat in the general education classroom.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good piece to make sure that we all belong. But beyond that, looking at how do we serve all students? And so my work in the Minnesota MTSS multi-tiered systems of support for that grant serves all students. So I get to have a voice and roll up my sleeves and do the work in when we're identifying beyond the Dreamcatcher project, beyond the biases, right, in
Mm-hmm.
our lens, and wondering why our students are struggling, whether it's academic, social, behavioral, mental. And so it's important that in that work, we're really implementing this year. How do we have our action plan? How are we measuring? And so one of the things that we've done to fund this year is also having a family community engagement specialist, part of the wheelhouse, one of the spokes in the wheelhouse, if you will,
Oh,
of the
nice. Okay.
MTSS program.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we know is what we really struggle with here and across the state too is attendance. But attendance is huge
Oh,
here.
yeah. Yeah.
It's a big challenge. And so that FACE specialist, family and community engagement specialist, is someone from the district for over 2 decades who will work at bridging those relationships, building that trust, that intergenerational trauma, that vision and view of, oh, I'm not too sure about this government entity school,
Mm-hmm.
as a government institution. And how do we bring families in? How do we really collaborate in partnership so that there is that language? That's one of my passions. That was my
Mm-hmm.
master's thesis that I worked on. And so it's in special education, right? Parents, caregivers, guardians, they are equal partners. And
Yeah.
so it's really
As
important
they should
when
be.
IDEA was reauthorized in 2004, what came out of that was instead of IDEA being performance based, or I'm sorry, compliance based, make sure you do your due process paperwork, make sure you have the IEP. Now it's performance based. And so that means that we have to show progress with students with disabilities. That means that team players, our parents, we have to make sure they're engaged, that their voice is heard for choice. So I take that with me every time I do my work every day. And that's what I'm excited about Red Lake.
One thing I often hear from school leaders is, I just want a partner who puts students first. At Lighthouse Therapy, that's exactly what we do. We don't have outside investors and we don't answer to shareholders. Instead, we answer to school leaders like you, those listening to this podcast. Whether you're wanting virtual, hybrid, or in-person therapy, our systems are designed to make your life easier and your team stronger. We are a therapy company run by therapists for the betterment of students. Visit lighthouse-therapy.com/brighter together to learn how we can help you support your students this year. Yeah, and having somebody locally like that who speaks the language, and I mean, and I don't mean like just like the Indian language, but I mean like speaks the cultural language, and having you somebody that also understands the culture. And we've at Lighthouse we've always talked about if we put a therapist in a place that is not where they live, we always have to think about what is the culture? What are the things that we need to think about for that therapist as well? Because we have to be sensitive to that. There's lots of continuing education things out there for therapists, making sure that, African American English, I should not be working on TH with a student that speaks African American English because they always change it to a D. And it's just one of those things. And it's like, it looks like an error if you're doing an articulation test, but it's not an error in their culture and in their what is the word? I'm sorry, I'm losing the word, but their dialect. There we go. Yeah. Dialect. Yeah. Yeah. In their dialect. So, just as it's great. I mean, it's exciting. I love what you guys are doing. That's fantastic.
Well, and to your point, that's what the Dreamcatcher project is about. It's about looking at those standardized tests. And, they're culturally representative in quotes, right?
Right.
In their sample. However, that's the deeper, more broader in depth point of view that the Dreamcatcher project brings, is trying to make sure that it's culturally relevant and responsive when we're doing that standardized testing. Our FACES, or family community engagement, she is lived in the community and not from Red Lake. She's from Bemidji. She does not speak the language, but she is fully immersed.
Right.
And so I think she is a great person, not only understanding the district for 2 decades, but the community. And she is so, it's beyond the district walls here in Red Lake Reservation, in the tribal council, the tribal government. knowing people, having those relationships built. So we're excited. This is our implementation year to roll up our sleeves and really make the grant come alive.
Fantastic. That sounds really, really great. I love it. I love it. So what would you say beyond that in education, in your experience, is one of the biggest challenges outside of just the cultural pieces? Where do you see, because I know that we know that this is an issue, but what else? I mean, what other things? Because you just have such a wealth of knowledge. I want to pull as much of it out of you as I can.
Oh, you sweet. Thank you. As a leader, my lens is students and how do we serve students best? That's why we do this. What I live by is education is about relationships. And my motto that drives my personal life and my work is people go where they're celebrated, not where they're
Mm,
tolerated.
mm-hmm.
And that carries over into caring for staff. There were days a couple decades ago, not to age myself, but you applied for a teaching job. It was competitive, and you
Mm-hmm.
were against 50 people, hundreds of people for that
Right.
coveted position. And now we're scrambling to find people. And we're filling positions as best we can across the state. And we're not the only ones. We've seen a huge exodus, as we all know. COVID has
Mm-hmm.
rocked our world, but we're asking teachers to do more with less pay sometimes with budgets. COVID, there's been school shootings, there's violence, there's all the things.
Right.
And so I'm always conscious the other half of my work is caring for staff and not just checking in how you're doing, but really, there's something called toxic trauma, and that happens on the job with first responders, people at front
Mm.
lines, medical providers, teachers. We
Yeah.
ask human beings to teach younger human beings all day in a room,
Mm-hmm.
and they're outnumbered. And then we place demands on them to show us proof that they're making progress when students may not show up ready to learn because of whatever story they carry that day.
Yeah.
We
Right.
carry our story that day that can
Right.
be a little different. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of my focus is around not resilience, but joy and hope. Resilience is a muscle and we flex it when we need it, but we're supposed to rest it so that it can
Yeah.
tear and grow and be there when we need it again.
Mm-hmm.
Resilience is not a state to be in. And so I'm cognizant of that and really cognizant about how are we having hope and joy in our work. Hope is a verb for me. It's not just a mood to attain to or a state to be in, but how do we have active hope? And so a lot of my care and work is about showing up in those classrooms, is connecting with teachers, is having that open communication and platform in teaching them about joy and hope and how they can have it for themselves and really knowing their boundaries and their limits. And
Mm-hmm.
then within that, their strengths, because the inertia of change, as I call it, the energy of change, most human condition, none of us like change.
Oh
Some
yeah,
of us
for sure.
embrace it, a small subgroup. I'm one of them. I'm good with change. I like it.
Yeah.
It keeps me alive. But we have to start with strengths. And so that's where I work with my staff in what are their strengths. We go where we're comfortable and we build from that in joy and hope and trust.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Kelly, if you could, okay, so one last question, and this is just, and you can't say money because we all need more money, but if you could miraculously, and this just goes down to what is
Mm.
that one thing? If you could miraculously change one thing in your world, just fix it. It's no longer a problem, and that would make such a big difference. What would that one thing be?
In my world, so I think of Red Lake
Mm-hmm.
and I think of the
Mm-hmm.
families
Mm-hmm.
and I think of the reputation of Red Lake. Over 15 years ago, as we know, there was a school shooting at this district.
Mm,
And where I live south of the reservation, because you can't live on the reservation unless you have allotted land, you're a tribal
right.
member, there is a bad rap. So the paradigm shift in how we see reservations, how we
Mm,
see indigenous people. This is a beautiful nation. These are
hmm.
beautiful kids, beautiful families who struggle. And they
Yeah,
struggle like anybody else in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Rochester and Duluth.
right. Right.
And I would hope that people would see the beauty and the healing that's happened here, the resilience and the grit, and that we keep a lens as educators that all parents are doing their best and they care. So
Yeah.
they don't respond, they don't show up at the IEP meeting, or they come for the food and they register and they leave, and they may not come to the early childhood family education class. It may be because they have two jobs,
Right.
or because they're taking care of someone else's kid so someone can go to work. So I
Right.
would just ask that we keep an open mind and recognize our implicit bias and assume that people are doing their best.
Right.
Have
That's a
hope.
great answer. Yeah. Have hope. Have hope. I love that. I love that so much. Great answer. I knew you'd have a great answer. That's why I was like, I didn't want to skip that question. I try to ask that question to every guest that I have on. And
Mhm.
sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. And, just depending on how the conversation was going. And I was like, I almost skipped it. And I was like, no, I know that she'll have an amazing answer. And of course you did. So,
Just from my heart.
yes. And that's the point of the question. It really gets to, where is the heart? Where is your heart? When you talk about fixing that one thing, it really boils down to, in your world, what can you fix? What can what do you wish that if we lived in the perfect world, that it would just go away, so
Yeah.
that kids could be served, so that people, and I tell you, educators, we're here because we love kids, because we love human beings, because we want to serve. And it's very
You make
clear
a
that
difference.
is, it make, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
if it's just one kiddo,
Mm-hmm.
that's your
Mm-hmm.
legacy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and for us, it's more than one. We know, ooh, that gives me chills. I got, just love it. I love it when we're doing God's work.
Good
I'm a
work.
Christian, you know that. I just am. It never come. It seems like I never get through a show without it coming out, and I'm not ashamed of it, obviously. But yeah, we're doing work that is generational, and
Absolutely.
breaking generational chains is a lot of what you were talking about too. Let's give these kids an opportunity that they're not going to get otherwise, and
Well, I think
showing
that's
them. Yeah.
that's what makes us all change agents,
Yeah.
whether it's in our circle time or our classrooms or our work-based learning or the district office.
Yeah.
We can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, what a fabulous conversation, Kelly. Thank you so much. Where should people go if they want to get in touch with you or want to learn more about Red Lake? Because I know people are going to want to talk to you.
Yeah. So Red Lake District 38 ISD, if you Google that, you will find our information. We're Red Lake, Minnesota. So pretty simple. If you Google us, you'll find us. Also, you can reach me, Kelly LaBelle Lewis, at redlake.k12.mn.us. And that information you email me, I'll email you back, and would love to chat.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Well, thanks again for being on the show. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you for having me. What a wonderful opportunity. I'm humbled. It's great to share just some thoughts and joy and hope.
Yeah. Well, the whole point of Brighter Together is because we are brighter together, and that's very evident. So thanks again.
Awesome. Blessings to you and your audience. Thank you so much.